WTMD.
Skin, it shivers, my hand, it holds. I can laugh about it, I can come in from the cold. I set the table and it sets me. Sway with me.
Jenn Wasner, Andy Stack, welcome back to WTMD. It's so great to be catching up.
Thanks so much for having us, Sam. It's good to be here.
Thank you.
If records are not always about something in particular, they can be informed by what's happening in the songwriter's life. And when you were coming up with the songs for Civilian, the two of you had been in a relationship for a few years and you were breaking up at that point. Can you talk about that? I know it's not something you really have talked about much.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I don't think it's something that we've talked about publicly until just now. And I do think in many ways that record was like a secret breakup record. Because it was all in it. It was there, right? A lot of the grief around, I think, coming to terms with the end of a relationship has to do with coming to terms with the end of an idea of yourself or like the person you would be within that relationship. And I think, you know, we've known each other for a really long time. And I don't know about you, Andy, but I sort of think of that moment in my life as sort of like neither of us had really fully become the versions of ourselves that we are, you know, the adult versions of ourselves. And I can certainly say with confidence that I had not. And so I think part of the snag of being in relation with anyone, kind of any kind of relationship, is that like sometimes you can grow together and sometimes you grow apart and your relationship has to evolve. I think it's a real point of pride for me that we've continued to be so close and to be friends and to be able to make music together. And I'm proud of the work that we did to, you know, make that possible. But at the time that we were making this record, there was a lot of hidden grief. You know, we never stopped touring. We never like stopped being a band. And I think there was a lot of fear about sharing that information and people not sort of being able to feel the same kind of confidence in our ability to do the band. And like, you know, I think we've felt in a lot of ways it was easier to not have to manage other people's fears and emotions, to just sort of like keep it to ourselves. So there is, I do kind of think of Civilian in a way as kind of like a secret breakup record.
Yeah, also, maybe it's partially the secret breakup record idea, or it's the universality of the songwriting, or maybe like the inscrutable quality of the songwriting. But it's like some of these songs I didn't even know they were breakup songs. I didn't even know what they were about. Not that they didn't, you know, make me feel something, but I think that's always been something both lyrically and musically that we've strived for, is like finding something that can encompass a lot of different things at once, a lot of different feelings at once that can be universal in that way.
And I think the important thing to note also is that, and the interesting thing is that, and this has to do with more of the way songs work and the like mindset that you can be in while creating, but like I maybe didn't know that they were breakup songs at the time either, right? Like sometimes you're in such a strange liminal, like subconscious state that it takes many years to look back on something you made and be like, oh, I didn't really fully understand consciously exactly what I meant, which is fascinating, I think. And that's why I think having some perspective on the work that you've made in the past it can be really enlightening in some ways that are comfortable and some ways that are less so.
Remind me, were the two of you public about the fact that you were dating beforehand?
No.
Okay.
Not that I intended.
So you weren't getting like a lot of questions from people afterwards?
No, it was all, you know, I think I still sort of feel like I'm more akin to keeping my personal life personal and my public life public. And I think even the fact that we're talking about it now, I mean, it wasn't that it was kind of like a question that the folks that work with us posed to us, as far as like, is this something that you guys would be comfortable with? Because it is interesting and it is a dynamic. It is sort of like aspect of the dynamic that has not been addressed. And that there is, you know, there has been enough distance from it at this point to sort of like be able to look at it in a way that feels like, it doesn't feel like particularly painful, but it does feel like illuminating and kind of fascinating. So yeah.
We're speaking with Jenn Wasner and Andy Stack of the band Wye Oak here on WTMD. And I want to introduce a couple of the songs that you've recorded in this session, which is phenomenal sounding and looking, by the way. Where did you record this?
It was recorded in Durham, where we both live now, at a venue called North Star Church of the Arts. So yeah, we were lucky enough to be connected into the Durham arts scene here, which we've both been living here for about 4 or 5 years, or me for 4 years, Jenn, for 6 years?
Coming up on 6.
Yeah.
I moved here in 2015. It's wild. And
So,
yes, and
yeah.
our friends, Chris Berner, engineered it, and our friend Spence Kelly, who has done a lot of work for us and for me as Flock of Dimes, filmed it.
Speak my name, use my real name, the one I gave myself. What can suggest my likeness as a painting? Suggest distance. But mountains are not pictures of mountains, are the letters that spell the word in the language we are speaking. The foundation and its meaning does not crumble underfoot for those who do not have the word. They stay. Regardless,
I was surprised to learn that Andy plays the guitar solo on Civilian, the song, and not
He
you,
does
Jenn.
indeed. He does indeed. Yeah, that's true.
Is it just for that song, or is Andy playing all of the guitar solos on this record?
I mean, I think it was not all the guitar solos on the record, but I think the thing that's so funny about people sort of like seizing upon me as like guitar person lady is that like we both kind of share recording duties. Like we performed in a very particular way for obvious reasons, where Andy played the drums and the key bass and I played guitar and sang. But like when we were in the studio, it's kind of all bets are off, and we both would do. I mean, I think we have a way of like directing each other and kind of like being like, oh, it's like this. No, actually, let me try this. And then like, there's a lot of like handing off of parts and no real rules as far as who plays what. So Andy's played a lot of guitar on our records just generally, I think.
Yeah. And Jenn has also played or written drum stuff as well. Or done some real cool like drum programming, or there's always been like a reductionist quality to the way that people think about it, but it's never been like that for us.
And you recorded this with Chris Freeland at Beat Babies, is that right?
Yeah, we did all the like basic tracking with him at Beat Babies.
And then you took those to Texas and worked with John Congleton, and he was kind of mixing and kind of producing on what sounds like a very like union worker mindset, where it was like, we're going to do this song, and then when it's done, and we're going to move on to the next song, and there's no going back. Like, we're only going forward. Is that kind of how it worked? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how. I don't think John really does this as much anymore, but and it was like kind of a helpful energy for us as like Pro Tools futzers. You know, we really want to just like endlessly pour over things. But, you know, he sort of had more of a first thought, best thought mentality. And for him, it was more like, you know, it really doesn't matter one iota if the tambourine is 2 dBs quieter. You know, it's like, is it doing the thing? And so, but for us, I think that was challenging because so much of our writing process actually happens in the recording process. So it's like it was harder for me to transition and turn off my like creative brain, where I'm constantly trying to like change things, fix things, move things around. So I don't know. I mean, I love working with John, and I think he's a really incredible producer and just a delightful person. And also like, he's not afraid to push people out of their comfort zones, which I think was definitely the case for this record.
And this space where John was operating out of was like a former funeral parlor. Mm-hmm. And while you were there, you were almost killed by a tornado.
I wouldn't say that we were, well, I guess kind of. The tornado itself did not come close to us, although we did see it.
Great mythology around.
Yeah, but it did come close to our hotel where we were staying, which we would have been at were we not out poking around in the on the grassy knoll.
Yeah, we did see the tornado though.
Yeah, we did see it.
We were like driving on the highway, to Dealey Plaza, and mm-hmm. we were coming back from Dealey Plaza, I guess. And it was like, wow, there's like not many people on the road, and like the sky is really green. And then we saw the tornado. Truly a nightmare.
It was so scary, and also we're so dumb. Like, we're just not from a place where tornadoes are really a thing. And so like there were sirens going off, and like the streets were empty, and we were like, wow, we have it all to ourselves. Like, what's going on? So stupid. We did not, I think if we had been at our hotel, we probably would have been in the basement or something. I don't know how that works, but yeah, it was my closest call thus far, for sure.
is the valley in my chest. Only something I knew I regret. So I figured here I find myself tugging out the linens on the bed, leaving no impression where I sat. The truth is always when it's gone, it's gone. I left you for charity, even in the full embrace of love. Is it really just what? Dream of binding, we dream of finding out. Morning comes and rider rings the hair, as if we are anything but brothers. And so I figure here I find myself mourning my condition. I can't tell if it's proof that I am sick or well. But you can't paint a picture of this. You can't see it undone. Truth is always when it's gone, it's gone. I left you for charity, even in the full embrace of love. Is it really just what?
At what point did you realize that Civilian was going to get as hot as it got? Because Jenn, I went back and read some early interviews that you gave, and I think you said something in 2011 that said, quote, "I think it's the kind of record that's a real grower. I think it will take people some time to get used to some of the songs. They're not exactly catchy in a lot of ways." And I feel like that actually describes
classic self-sabotage, Jenn.
Oh my God, I'm such a dingbat.
If that's true for anything, I think it's true for Shriek of all your records. But Civilian like blew up, seemed like pretty quickly.
I mean, I will be the first to admit that like many artists, I am never the best judge of my own work, and how it will be received from outside of me. But yeah, I do think it sort of seemed to have a kind of immediate impact that I think maybe neither of us were particularly expecting. I certainly wasn't expecting it. And it snowballed. I think a big part of it too is that like we were touring our asses off. I mean, we were touring an insane amount. And then more, I mean, I couldn't do it now. There's no way that I think that we just said yes to everything. And I think that in combination with whatever connection it had with folks at the time was really what made the difference. But we were, that was the year where we were just like everybody's opening band. It was just constant.
But at what point did you get an inclination that this was not just going to be like another series of opening, supporting dates? This was going to be like the record that, gets a song on 3 major television shows and, gets 20 million streams on Spotify eventually and all that. Like, at what point did it kind of click for you?
I'm not sure. I think I was honestly, I don't know if it clicked. I don't have a memory of thinking that, because I think I was so exhausted and depleted and overworked and in my own head that I wasn't really able to be present for what an extraordinary thing that was. I think it was a very fuzzy time for me, and in not always the best sense of the word. I was doing a lot of pretty unhealthy things to cope with the fact that I was working myself kind of to death. And I think that I was more fixated on how difficult it was for me to continue to inhabit those songs and play those parts night in and night out over and over and over again. I think we did like 220 shows in a year or something. And it was just, it was punishing, and I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, I think it did, in many ways, it did the thing it was supposed to do, but the payoff is that, or the trade-off rather, is that like I wasn't really there to enjoy it. So I don't really have a memory of that clicking at all. I think it was really after the fact that I was like, oh wow, like there's been a shift in a way.
Do you, Jenn, still have kind of a complicated relationship with the song Civilian?
I'm laughing because Andy's laughing too. Yeah, I mean, I do. I think that it has, it's been the subject of many a fraught conversation between Andy and I.
There's been a lot of times like at the end of a tour, this has happened multiple times, where we'll be at the end of a tour and we'll play that song, and Jenn will get a big shit-eating grin on her face, and we'll be like, that's the last time I'm ever playing that song.
Well, yeah. Do people come up to you after your shows and like, that was such a great show, why didn't you play Civilian? Like, does that ever happen?
Often, for a time, we always played it.
Yeah.
We were really in our heads about the expectation, especially at the height of it, that there was this my reaction was I was reacting to a real thing, right? Like I was reacting to what I considered to be a disproportionate attachment to that song over the other things that we've made, which is a thing that happens, and I think that a lot of bands deal with and are in some ways like lucky to deal with. And some people, I think, can embrace that. And I'm trying to be compassionate with myself and sort of admit that like I was not then, and maybe am not now, the kind of person or artist to really be able to like not feel some pushback to that. I just can't help myself. Like I really don't want to be what it is that I want, when I perform, I want to be present. I want to be there. I want it to be real. And I just can't inhabit that song authentically anymore. I can't do an honest, it's getting to it got to the point where I couldn't do an honest performance of that song without feeling just waves of shame and disconnection from my body. It has nothing to do with me resenting people for liking it. I think in many ways, that song, more than almost any other, has changed our lives and careers substantially. And I'm grateful for the fact that people have connected with it to the extent that they have. It's more about the fact that I just had a very visceral, physical, psychological reaction to being forced to go back into that headspace over and over and over again. And, you know, it got to a point where it was like, if this is what it is to be a successful band, I don't want to do it. Then it's not for me.
If it's true that time moves in one direction, then why is my fate still in your life? Through days, but if past stays strong, circle back.
You know, my sons are 7 and 8, and they went through a pretty heavy Wye Oak phase a few years ago. And one of the questions that my older son asked, and I feel like this kind of, I'm asking this about Civilian because it kind of peaked around this time. The whole, like, you know, I don't want the lyrics written down. You wanted them to be kind of experienced and heard. And Samir, my oldest son, asked me once some version of, why is she mumbling? What is she saying? Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah. Kids.
can you speak to that?
Yeah, actually, I kind of know what he means. And I kind of write about it actually in the essay that accompanies the reissue, which I think is, it's been kind of a process for me to come to terms with or discover or uncover my authentic voice. And I think at the time I was making this record, a lot of the music that I listened to and connected with the most was made by singers that had very different voices from me. I mean, I was listening to a ton of like David Berman and Bill Callahan and Kurt Wagner and like, you know, sort of men with idiosyncratic voices. And I think I was unconsciously sort of hyper aware of the feminineness of my voice, how different my voice was from those. And also, of course, because I live in the world, my internalized misogyny around just female voices in general and what they can be and what they can sound like. I think that there's a lot of dissonance or like internal unconscious conflict when I open my mouth to sing, which I hear in my voice then when I listen back to those recordings, which is partially why I have such a kind of uncomfortable reaction to them sometimes, because I can unconsciously hear the sort of like lack of self-acceptance in my voice when I was singing at the time. It doesn't sound like me to me. Whereas now I feel like I have a very different relationship to my voice in sort of like letting it develop into what it actually is and what it naturally wants to be, rather than trying to kind of force it to be something that it was never going to be. But I think that was a real long process for me as well.
I never realized that family lineage and tradition was on your mind so much, especially when you're working on this record. And you've spoken about it some, and, you know, the idea of what a woman's role is and can be. And I, you know, it's there on the record, you know, my mother's mother's mother's, you know, and there's some lines in it as well about that, but it was really weighing heavily on your mind at the time.
Yeah. I mean, it still is, to be honest with you. If anything, it's more so on my mind. I mean, it's interesting. It's like there are so many cultural and societal expectations of women, particularly women who don't sort of like fit in a prescribed idea of what a woman at a certain age is supposed to be or do. And I think for me, it's funny. I was just talking about this with my boyfriend last night. It was triggered by Halloween, because seeing all the families and the kids with their trick-or-treating, and I'm sort of like the weird, creepy old lady on the block that like nobody really, like I don't really like, I'm not really involved. Like I feel, I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel very confident about the choices I've made in my life, and the fact that based on what I know of myself and what makes me happy, I have in many ways the life that I've always dreamed of. And yet, I feel often disconnected or detached from some like major human milestone experiences that a lot of people, I would say the vast majority of people, go through. You know, I've chosen to not like get married and have kids. I play in a band. I travel. I have a life that's in many ways kind of atypical. And I know that it's right for me, and yet I still feel a lot of shame around it. And I don't think that it's necessarily that I'm being specifically judged for that choice, but there is a real sense of like alienation from the people that I know well, and from my family, and just sort of like there's a separation that happens. I think a lot of women I know who are my age, I think it's kind of a heavy thing to be the first generation of women who like felt as though making these sorts of alternate decisions was even a possibility. You know, I know for my mom, it wasn't like a question for her whether she was going to have kids or not. It was just what you did. And so there is a weight to that. And it also feels like an immense privilege. But it sets you apart in a way that also feels kind of lonely at times, particularly during the pandemic. For me, it felt very lonely and strange. So I think that Civilian in many ways was like the start of me unpacking a lot of these ideas, and I can assure you that the work continues.
If you should doubt my heart, remember this: that I could lie to you if I believed it was right to do. And if you should think instead that I would forget all the lies I said were not meant for me and meant for you. That would be the taste I could not forgive. Only they to doubt the only way that what was true before is true today. And what I have learned of you does not assure that you bow before my will, but I believed it then, believe it still. No, I believed it then, believe it still.
Jenn, Andy, I wanted to say congratulations on this record turning 10 years old. It's a really cool milestone. And also, thank you for being up for so many things with WTMD over the years. From that first interview back in 2007 to, the BSO Pulse show and the airport baggage claim show and the evening show here. And I could go on, but I just want to say on behalf of all of us here, we really appreciate it. You've probably done more with us than many other bands from Baltimore. So we really appreciate that.
Well, we appreciate your support. Thank you. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
WTMD.